How many of you know Henry Wallace? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Who wants to tell me something about Henry Wallace? Secretary from Iowa. Hey, you can't go wrong there, right? Anything else? And the founder pioneer. This is a local, homegrown Iowa boy, vice president, secretary of agriculture, and the founder pioneer. You know, when we look at Iowa, we think there's a few people who understand the importance of productivity, of increased yield. And we look at Pioneer in our backyard, John Deere tractor and everything else. We begin to think that Iowa understands the importance. Pioneer Company here locally, they've even held very true to Wallace's initial vision of increasing productivity and profitability for the customers by using technological innovation. Let's talk about how that production has increased. Anybody want to guess what the average bushel per acre production was in 1866 when they first started recording the production? Somebody's got to guess at least. 20 bushels an acre. 20, maybe 25-ish, depending on where, but 20 bushels an acre. Now, let me just ask, if you know any local farmers, do you think any local farmers could be excited about producing 20 bushels an acre, and actually would 20 bushels an acre even pay for the seed that they put in the ground now? I don't think so. I don't think that there's going to be any benefit in planting ground and producing 20 bushels an acre. In fact, the truth is, we wouldn't have any farmers. There would be no profit in it, whether it fed people or not. They might be producing enough for themselves, and that would be it. Now, Henry Wallace understood early on that there was importance to increasing the yield. Now, I might point out that I think initially he was part of a corn, what I think they would call a beauty pageant. Which ear of corn looked the best? And he looked at that and he thought, well, you know, this is great, and this one looks beautiful and everything, but which one produces more? And he understood that the value of production was what was really important. So hence he began cross-pollinating and looking for ways to actually genetically increase the productivity. Anybody want to guess how far we came along in 1960? What was the production average bushel per acre at that point? Let's say 60. This is average nationally. 60 bushels an acre. I don't know that would get us too far either. But significant increase, okay, from 20 bushels an acre. 1990, now things had jumped quite a bit at this point, 120 bushels an acre. This year, nationally, they're estimating around 180 bushels an acre. Now, in Iowa, I've heard much greater than that, 200 and 220. I mean, there's good production. We got good soil. But the average of 180. Over 200? Do you realize that is tenfold increase? In fact, that's a biblical number. Tenfold increase in production, in yield, in harvest. Iowa understands the importance of what you put in the ground. Now, let me give you just a couple other statistics from Iowa. You can find this on the Living History Farms website even. 35.7 million acres in Iowa. How many acres are used for farming? Over 30 million acres used for farming. Of the cropland, it's over 26 million acres used just for cropland. Iowa has ranked number 1 in production of, anybody want to guess? Corn, soybeans, hogs, and eggs. Iowa understands agriculture and farming and understands the need for production. Actually maybe just understands the need for feeding the world. How true. But what do you do? Have you ever just asked yourself the question, what do you do to increase production? Whether it's in a church or whether it's at a farm, whether it's in whatever industry, what do you do to increase production? And the truth is, you can do it a couple ways. You can plant more seeds. You can get more ground. You can plant better seed and genetically better seed. You can fertilize better or use different fertilizer in different place depending on what is needed. You can use better machinery. The average farm today is like 345 acres in Iowa. That's still smaller than I expected. But farms never used to be anywhere near that size because they couldn't plant or harvest that much. We have machinery that allows us to produce that much. So, when I'm thinking about this and I think about Iowa, I begin to realize Jesus knew what he was talking about when he so often talked about getting into the fields, putting down a seed for the harvest. He was talking about getting out because the harvest is ready and the workers are few. Jesus understood this need, and even though he spoke in parable, he was helping people understand the scriptural need that we have. So in this passage, Jesus knew what he was saying when he says, you reap what you sow. If you sow bountifully, you reap bountifully. If you sow sparingly and just barely, this is about all I can do. This is all the time that I've got, all the money that I can afford. This is all the gifts that I have. And just put little bits in, we get little bits out. I read this and I thought, well, this is an interesting contrast because this week Jesus is saying you reap what you sow. But last week we read this parable. Remember the parable of the mina? And the master gave a mina to each of his servants. And the first one invested it and he came back with 10 more. The second one invested it, came back with 5 more. The third one, remember, just took and hid it because he said, I know that you're a severe master. I know that you reap where you do not sow. Okay, so last week's parable, Jesus was telling about the master who reaped where he didn't sow. And this week he's telling a parable that says you reap what you sow. Is that a contrast? Does that mean Jesus didn't know what he's talking about? Does that mean Jesus is confused along the way? I don't think so. I think if we look at last week's parable, we have to understand Jesus knew what he was talking about because the master reaped where he did not sow. Why? Because he gave the servants that one mina. And that one mina, that servant went out and invested and came back with 10 more. Yes, he reaped where he didn't sow because he entrusted his wealth, his gifts to the servants. So when we look at these two together, we realize God is the master. God is the nobleman who has given bountifully to each of us, has given us more than we can ever grasp or comprehend. And he said, go and use it. Use it for my glory. The truth is, God is the nobleman who has given us the seed of salvation in Jesus Christ. He's a nobleman who's commanded us to go and make disciples, to go into the fields which are ripe for harvest. We are the ones who are the workers. We're the stewards in the field. We're the servant to the master. And we have one responsibility. We have one responsibility to give back to God and glorify God with what God has given us. What's interesting in this passage is Jesus doesn't stop there. He doesn't say that you've got to do this exactly this way. No, he says, whatever you do, the most important thing, he says, focus on the attitude of your heart. Because God loves a cheerful giver. The truth is, when we look biblically, we find that God asks for a tithe. Yes, God asks for 10%, just a small portion so that we can say thank you for what we have. Yes, God asks for worship one day a week that we might set it apart to glorify God. He asks for service and for prayer and for our words and our testimony. But in this passage, Jesus points out that it's more important that whatever we do, whatever we decide, that we do it with a cheerful heart. We do it with an attitude of joy. Just like the balloons that I had the kids take off, I mean, which would you rather carry around, or which do you want to be to the world around you? Do you want to be that balloon filled with helium that's uplifting and encouraging and joy-filled, or do you want to be that balloon that just sinks and is heavy laden and is got this burden in your heart? There's a quote that a very brief one that I think, if you take one thing with you, take this, because I think, especially going into the Christmas season, this is important. Cheerfulness in the giver enhances the gift. You know what I'm talking about? Have you guys experienced that? Here, let me give you a good example. If any of you ever had a child or been the child that has walked up to mom or dad and tugged on their pant leg and says, Mom, Dad, look what I drew you. And just this little picture, some scribbles. I mean, they might tell you what it's supposed to be, but you have no clue what it is. And it's just kind of this drawing. Chicken scratchings of crayon or whatever, and sometimes it's even on paper that you didn't want them to write on, or it's scribbled onto the table and the floor at the same time. But they give this to you, and they're so excited and so happy about it, and they're just, you see the joy of the giver, this cheerfulness in the person's heart of giving, and as a parent, you just go, oh, that is the most precious thing ever. And how many of us have taken those and we've put them up on the refrigerator and said, that is a true example of love. That's the true example of someone who loves me unconditionally with everything that they have, even though they don't have much. And the truth is, when I think about God, I think, this God who created the universe, the expanses of which I have no comprehension. And David says, who am I? Who are we that God, that you created all these, the universe, and yet you're mindful of us. You're aware of us. You care about us. And all of a sudden I come to God, worshiping God or trying to give back a small gift, and I'm just like this little kid tugging on God's pant leg saying, God, I love you. See, I'm giving you some scribbles. But see, it's the attitude of the giver that enhances the gift. In this sermon series so far, we've touched on a couple topics. The first week, remember, we talked about we've won the lottery. Statistically, the fact that you're alive and that you're here, it's literally impossible. And yet God loves you and knows you by name in every detail of your life. We've won the lottery. In chapter 9, verse 15 of this same passage, it says, thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. And in James, it says this, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creations. Every good gift, perfect gift is from God. Whether it's our life, whether it's our friends and our family, our abundance, our wealth, our job, home. Everything we have is a gift from God. Remember, it's like we've won the lottery, literally. Last week we talked about how we're all stewards. We're not owners. None of it belongs to us. Everything that we have belongs to God. In fact, from 1 Peter 4, it says, show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. You see, even the gifts that we have, they're not ours. Our physical abilities, our mental abilities, our intellect, our emotions, God gave us those. The real question is, it's like that gift, that mina in our hand. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to honor God with it? Are we just going to take and hide it because we're afraid to use it? Or are we going to invest it in such a way that brings God the glory and brings back tenfold? This week we're talking about it's an attitude of the heart. And as it says in our passage today, each one should give what he has decided to give in his heart, not out of regret or compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now, what are the things that we can give back to God? I'll talk about them in terms of the Methodist Church. I'll talk about them actually in terms of what's on our our pledge cards, our commitment cards. And if you've got those, feel free to take them out and look at them. Yes, on the front, we do talk about finances. We talk about that primarily because it helps us set a budget. We need to know what kind of ministry we can do and how we can invest in the community, kind of programs we can have at Chapel Ridge and otherwise. How can we make those things happen? So we ask that so that we can make some decisions and be good stewards as a church. But I remind you today that we write those numbers down with a cheerful heart. Don't do anything, say anything, or make a commitment that's begrudging or feels obligatory. Do so with joy. Do so in a way that reflects to God how you've been blessed by God. Even if it's just that tug on God's pant leg and says, I can't give much, but here's what it is. Here's how much I love you. Do so in a way that shows God what you have and what you choose to do with the gifts that God's given you. We also have on the back, we have other categories, and they all reflect the Methodist membership vows, your prayers. I'm asking for you guys to pray. I'm asking you for you to pray for the church, for the members that are part of your church family, for me as the pastor and family. I ask you to pray for the ministry and mission that we have in the church, in the community, ways that we can continue to be involved. We had a men's study, actually a couple women even got together. We had almost a dozen of us there at Village Inn yesterday and looking at how we can do a couple other programs even more effectively, Big Give, serving in the community. Pray. Commit to praying. In fact, I would encourage you, write down a number on there. I'll pray for the church every day. Or I'll pray for the church once a week, and then take it seriously. Your presence, I tell everybody, it makes a difference. God asks you to set aside a day a week. I know time is the most precious thing we have, and we're always traveling or busy. And I tell people, if you're traveling, great. Find a church, go with a friend, go with a neighbor, go somewhere where you're at. Just experience what else is there. In fact, come back, bring back some great ideas with the kinds of ministry and kind of worship that they're doing. But make that time a commitment between you and God, that you will honor God with your time. Time is something God has given us as well. I would encourage you even more so, this potluck that's coming up on December 2nd and 3rd, invite a friend or a neighbor. Bring a dish. Share in fellowship. What a great time to meet and actually sit down and talk to some of the people across the aisles that we don't always get a chance to build a relationship with. That particular one's going to come in a couple categories when it comes to being present and praying over the growth of the church, but then also in the category of witness. In the category of witness, we have an opportunity to share. By the way, I do not encourage you all to go out and start quoting Bible verses to your friends. I don't think that usually comes off pretty well. I think usually that comes off as offensive and rude, and people are like, I want nothing to do with that. But you know what you can do? You can go out and you can tell people that you are part of a church that's doing amazing things. You can tell people that you love the kind of fellowship that you have and the kind of service projects that you do. You can say, we've seen answered prayer. And you can say, you know what? We've got a potluck coming up. I'd love to see you join us. We've got Christmas at the barn in Johnston, which is a beautiful service to set the stage for Christmas. Come and join me. That's a witness. And we take that as a membership vow as a part of the church. The other area is service, and I encourage people, get involved. Write down on your card, I'm gonna volunteer. I'm gonna help with a big give project and work on somebody's home. Yeah, I'm gonna go on a mission trip. I'm gonna help with whatever. I encourage you to write down on the back of that card other areas of commitment. It's not just all financial. What is God calling you to? And then I want you to think of that mina that we talked about last week and what God's given you. How can you give back in a way that says, God, I really love you. Thank you for the abundance in my life. I want you to pray over that. In fact, I invite you to take a moment, just hold that commitment card in your hands and pray over it and say, God, I want to take the next step more than just getting by. I want to take another step to serving you, to loving you, to commitment.